Trustee Warren.
And I'm trying to make sure that I keep all the options straight. I mean, yeah,
You are for that, yes.
I certainly understand some of the time constraints that you're dealing with. You're basically your person down and trying to coordinate that. When I read through, my thought was that I was leaning towards option number 2, but again, trying to keep all these options straight. I just want to make sure that putting a stake in the ground, that I would think that somebody part-time or contracted would be somewhere where we'd want to focus our attention here. And I do understand some of the concerns about enforcement. I do understand that Shorewood, of course, is some older housing stock. It's one of the things I absolutely love about Shorewood. But we do keep, under one of the options, again, trying to keep them straight, one half time for enforcement. We have one half a head count for enforcement. So there is that still in there, provided that we provide you with another half a head count in order to perform all the required inspections, keep the inspection level at the same place. So that'd be the option I would be leaning towards at this point.
Is that 3 or is that 2 with an extra half time for inspectors? So you want to have 2 full-time inspectors and a half time for enforcement?
Ideally, I'd like to keep inspection where it is and the half time for
So my option D, that was the one that I threw out there.
Yeah,
it was not on a piece of paper at this moment. So I
would support. I ideally would like to be fully staffed. I think code enforcement is critical. We have finally got a handle. People are improving the properties, and it's not just the southeast corner. I'm sure there's houses in your neighborhood that are vacant or absentee landlord that are slowly deteriorating, and the garages where the roofs are deteriorating. Just looking out my backyard, I can look at my garage. Need one. So I mean, keeping on top of that, we could quickly go back, and our hard housing values we're holding it, and they're doing good. You just gotta look south to Milwaukee, and you let your eye off the ball, and your property values that little savings each year could quickly cut your value of your house. So ideally, I support fully staffed. As we get into the budget process, we may have to look at somehow how that might be modified, but I would like to look at that in the whole package of services, not just like, okay, we're going after the building inspection before we can get into the process. And I support the hiring the part. If we have to cut back a half a position, it's the other hiring the half part-time on-staff person. So you can have them on.
So I just want to clarify that 2 things. One of the things that I've heard from the residents is that not all sections of our village have alleys. It is very heavily in one area. And so that, I think, is why a lot of the complaint or upset residents feel like they're getting not targeted, but because not everyone has an alley. So there must be the same level of inspection, but you can't get to the back of other houses. So it is a little bit maybe why we're hearing more concerns from residents on the west side, because there's more alleys. I'm just making that general observation. The other thing I wanted to mention was that assessed values, we don't have it out in front of us, but duplexes do continue to go down. And so I would like to understand, have we made a lot of progress in that? And then I appreciate, Tim, thank you for being here and explaining. But Tim did mention when code enforcement, that program went away, he had 4 to 5 hours that he could do more things. And that wasn't the intent of the position at the time. So my last statement is, and I want to hear from Rebecca as well, my conversations with Rebecca is to look at things in the whole. And so we are going to have to make some, if we want the tax rate not to be 6.8%, we may have to make some reductions in levels of service. I've heard from a couple of trustees and some residents, and myself in practice of government, you typically look at vacancy. You never want to lay someone off. At least that's what Rebecca has shared. That's my experience in government. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do. So that's unfortunately where we're at today. Is we haven't talked about the DPW ones. There is a police officer. So we get down to it. If we wanted to reduce the tax rate from 6 to 2 or whatever it may be, these are the ones that we would be looking at, I hope. I mean, that's standard practice in government. So I apologize if it seems like it's targeting, it's certainly not meant to be. The timing was, it just happened to be right before budget, and it was a vacancy, which we'll look at all the vacancies equally, I will. But I do think that out of all the positions, if we needed to start downsizing or reducing levels of service, I am perfectly comfortable with reducing code enforcement. I do understand any reduction in levels of service, in any service we provide. I mean, garbage collection is the other vacancy, and then, what was the third one? Building repair, building maintenance. So we're gonna have that same discussion, and so I have considered it. I've taken my step back and said, what is the service level if I had to pick one of where, and this seems to be a residential accepted one, not to everyone, but more so than saying garbage collection. So I just wanted to throw that there. Trustee Buck.
Okay, and I don't know, I'm not hearing from the same people obviously you're hearing from as far as this, but anyway, we're talking about budget here, and the housing stock and our housing value directly impacts all future budgets, and we all know that. So if the quality of our housing stock decreases because we don't have a service or a program that ensures that we maintain it, then the amount of revenue that we collect in the future will decrease. So this will impact all future budgets for the village. Maybe not in the short term for us this year, but over time. And we do not have a comparable housing stock to Whitefish Bay. We are 54% rental in this village. We have a very different, and the age of our homes is much different than those in Whitefish Bay. Whitefish Bay has a much, as I said, we're 54% rental. I can't remember the exact numbers, but they're almost exclusively single family. So there are many differences, and that's not a fair comparison. Again, to Trustee McKegg's point, the whole neighbor complaint-based system, absolutely not. That is not a system that I would want to see here as well. And also with that rental, who are we impacting negatively? The renters. So if we're going to say that we're not going to have a code compliance, we don't, not compliance, the people who can afford it the least who are renting are the houses that or the properties that they're renting in. If they're dilapidated and deteriorating, we're not doing much about it because we don't have the adequate staff, then we're kind of shifting the burden. So it's a socioeconomic disadvantage, and you are at a disadvantage, your department, because of this unfortunate situation that this happened to coincide around budget time, well in advance, and you happen to apply a Band-Aid. So I hear, and I would ask our new trustees that this is not an easy decision. It sounds like an easy thing to make. And also this reduction in staff, I'm not buying it. We have other options in the budget, and this is kind of a false dichotomy that things set up. And you guys are kind of a pawn here in this. But we need to look at to make this cut right now based on I would rather, if anything, we would hold off on this decision for budget versus making a motion this evening to reduce staff or to keep it at this reduced level. So,
Trustee Menta, then Trustee Warren, and then I do want to hear from Rebecca. Trustee Menta.
Well, I'm surprised to see that you want to hold off because your last comment was we should make the decision tonight. I also want to say.
if we were going to cut
Yeah, I was
position,
talking.
yeah.
I also want to say, I don't think there is any quantitative proof that there's a connection between levels of building enforcement and assessed value or housing value. I don't think you're going to ever be able to show that, and I don't think it exists. I think housing turns over, new owners come in, young families come in and buy, improve, or add, and they put on additions.
renters.
Please don't interrupt me. And
then
that's
Trustee Bockhorst. Trustee
if
Menta.
I'm allowed to speak, then
No,
there's
Stop interrupting her, please. Trustee Bockhorst.
There's a
Or you need to be removed.
natural turnover in housing as people get old and move on in life or move up and out of Shorewood or wherever and there's housing turnover and people come in and improve housing. It doesn't really, I don't think the amount that code enforcement that there's really a causal relationship there at all. And I would like to make a motion that we reduce FTE for code compliance to 0.5, and that we ask the planning director to return with staffing options that reflect a 0.5 FTE for code compliance.
Second. Further discussion, trustee Warren?
Well, I was gonna say that, this is a hard one for me, because I think that it's best viewed through the lens of budget and the entire budget process. I feel like we're doing it piecemeal in a way. That being said, there is something to be said for making the decision. I know I've only been here a couple of months, but I think this is something that has kind of gone up and down. I'm struggling between those two. I don't know how long you've waited to fill this position. I don't know how long it's been open.
End of June.
End of June, okay.
And you're requesting that we make the decision, that's what I heard. You're hoping that we can give you direction at some point.
Correct.
Okay.
I
just want that.
I guess
I would love to fill it in July, but I
to
was asked to hold until.
put a fine point on it, if we do it as part of budgeting, is it your strong preference that we make the decision tonight, or if we push it back and do it as part of budgeting, is that also an acceptable solution for you? I guess I just don't know the strain that's on your department right now. I'd like to
Maybe
see
my
that.
understanding of the budgeting is it would happen within a month or month and a half, and so
November.
we can make it work. As Tim mentioned, it would in the meantime mean probably less enforcement as we have been doing, because that's the Band-Aid that we've been doing essentially is having Tim fill in for building inspection on the thing he's certified to do and hold off enforcement. And so we can Band-Aid it for another month and a half or 2 months. I just wanted to be clear that this is not a permanent solution how we're currently operating. And so if it needed to be discussed then, I wanted to have it discussed as an actual topic and not in a one of 35 things. And so I appreciate the conversation we've been having. If we needed to wait, we can do whatever we need to do, I suppose.
I mean, and that was my question.
Right.
You know, if it's something where we can wait and look at it holistically as part of the entire budget, I think that might lead to a better solution here as opposed to.
And if the conversation's been had, that at least in the meantime, the Band-Aid can include, delayed response time, and that we're all clear on that. There's less pressure internally for my current staff to feel obligated to, maintain the levels that they have been asked to perform in May, if it's clear that over the next month and a half, 2 months, a 3-day response or you can't do the garbage inspections and 17 of them pile up, we get the complaints, they come into us, whether it's a contractor upset that we weren't there right away, or whether it was someone saying, why isn't this garbage taken away? It's clear for my staff at least, if I can say, we will have an answer in 2 months.
Yeah, the order bounds are 2 months.
Right.
I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Obviously, we get through it as part of the budgeting process, but I think that it makes a lot of sense to look at it as a whole there as opposed to one-off decision.
So just to go on that, and I want to make a plea for our planning department, and thank you for being so gracious. If for any reason, we know what the budget gap is, everyone has a pretty idea, I don't know what it is, we haven't discussed it, but where you'd like a tax range in about, like the tax rate increase, 2%, 5%, you have a general idea. We do have all the options in front of us, so I want, if the decision isn't going to change, because it's not going to be a lot of new information, we may decide to do a different cost reduction, but if in general you think it is a viable option that you would support to reduce as part of that, as part of your thinking going into budget of the options presented, then I would prefer for our staff's purposes that we move forward with giving direction, because I feel like we're split right now, and I don't know how much help we've been in satisfying what they need to tell the public. So saying that, if it's okay with the board, I would like to hear from our planning director just on a bigger picture, like can you help us, or what are your thoughts?
Well, first I want to thank Bart and his department for what they've been doing so far. And I guess in front of the board, one of the things that I think will be helpful right now is some acknowledgement for their department that in the time period, you didn't have to legally stay until whenever this Band-Aid gets fixed, that it is very appropriate that the staff not feel the need as if they need to respond at the prior level of service, as if you had 2 inspectors. So if there's a call and it can't be addressed at this point in time, you need to be okay and be okay with your staff and responding within a reasonable expectation. Tonight I heard that, that reasonable expectation voiced is 2 to 3 days. Is that what I heard?
And part of that is the board backing that up, so that if we get
Correct.
complaints
Right.
from, that we're able to, we're in a position to support and say this is where we're at.
Okay. I also feel that within the scope of that discussion, if there is an issue that your department has, where that comes to, you know, I think what you're hearing is this board support to assist in that. So I think that's something right away that,
You might want to take a straw poll.
we can take a straw one.
I said you might want to take a straw poll on that one.
Okay, should I take a straw one?
No, not right this moment.
Okay, well, because that's just kind of what we have to do, right? We gotta pull the bootstraps and try to field things in the best way that we can. With respect to, reduction, this is something that I said to Bart at the end of the last meeting, of which we've kind of gone through some of the alternatives. I said, you know, Bart, if the board makes a decision to reduce to 4 FTEs, I really think, based upon what I am learning about this community and about the dialogue with the board, I really think that it would be valuable for us to go back and really lean into what are our priorities for enforcement.